Twitter finally blinks over the new IT law. Microblogging site Twitter on Sunday appointed a resident grievance officer for India after a long spell of face-off with the government. The tech giant named Vinay Prakash as the officer as per the mandate under the new IT laws. On its website, Twitter named Vinay Prakash as its resident grievance officer and provided an email contact ID of the newly appointed officer. The appointment comes amid a huge standoff with the government since March when the new rules came into effect. Twitter has been in the eye of a storm over its failure to comply with the new IT rules in India. In fact, the company has also published its compliance report for the period of May 26, 2021 to June 25, 2021. Now, this was another key requirement under the IT rules that came into effect on 26th of May. Twitter had previously appointed Dharmendra Chatur as its interim resident grievance officer for India as required by the IT rules. However, Chatur stepped down last month abruptly.
The ongoing tussle between the government of India and Twitter seems to have come to some sort of an halt after the appointment of Vinay Prakash as the new grievance officer in India. Vinay was appointed on Sunday morning and his details are now also reflecting on Twitter's official website. Now, this appointment comes after the implementation of new IT rules which made it mandatory for all social media platforms with over 50 lakh users to appoint 3 officers in India, all of whom also had to be residents of India. Now, Twitter had tried to comply with these rules by appointing Dharmendra Chatur as the new grievance officer. However, Chatur left his position earlier, after which Jeremy Kessel was appointed as the new grievance officer. Now, the problem with Kessel's appointment was that he was not a resident of India, which meant that the appointment was not in line with the new IT rules. The government, of course, wasn't happy with this, and Twitter had also lost its intermediary status in the country, which meant that it is no more given any sort of protection against anything put on the platform by any of its users, and Twitter is directly responsible for the content published on the platform. The Delhi High Court, in fact, had asked Twitter last week the timeline in which it can actually appoint a new grievance officer, and also had sought clarification over the delay, and Twitter had asked for 8 weeks, but now we finally have a grievance officer who is also a resident of India. Vinay Prakash is based out of Bangalore, and his mandate will include addressing the queries of Twitter users in India, and he will also act as a bridge between the government of India and Twitter. So we can expect this whole saga to finally settle down and calm down, at least for a brief period.
Now, I'm going to take you through exactly what the role of a grievance officer here is. Right now, Twitter's grievance officer, newly appointed, will have to identify any inflammatory messages that's been put up on the social media platform. The tech giant there is to name the first originator of the illegal posts. That's also mandatory now under this new compliance. The chief compliance officer is to ensure that the new rules are followed adequately and also will be liable for any illegal posts that's been put up by anybody. In fact, the nodal officer to block illegal or inflammatory content within 24 hours. In fact, we're looking at law enforcement agencies keeping a strict vigil of any of such inflammatory content that's put up on the social media or the microblogging platform Twitter, and Twitter will be eventually liable for any illegal posts put up. Resident grievance officer also to be in charge of user grievance, and 24 hours itself given to address any grievance there. And again, Twitter will be responsible if at all any illegal content's been put up. Now, Twitter got in troubled waters pretty much right from the start of this year. What started with a battle for freedom of speech and expression soon boiled down to defiance of the law of the land. Here's a quick look at the events that took place over the year since January on Twitter in loggerheads with the Indian government.
The farmers of India were protesting, and on 26th of January 2021, the peaceful agitation turned violent. The government of India asked social media giant Twitter to remove tweets that the government said had used an incendiary hashtag. The government also asked Twitter to block accounts allegedly used by Sikh separatist groups and backed by Pakistan. Some 250 accounts were blocked by Twitter in response to a legal notice by the government, citing objections based on public order. But within hours, Twitter restored these accounts, citing insufficient justification for continuing the suspension. Twitter was sent another notice by the Government of India asking them to block the accounts. Twitter responded by clarifying that they had blocked 500 accounts that they suspected of manipulation of platform and spam activities. But they refused to block accounts of media outlets, journalists, activists and politicians, as they said it would be an infringement on the freedom of speech.
So
The Law Ministry in Parliament promised to take action against the tech giant. In a meeting between the government and Twitter held within weeks of the incident, the Indian government told the tech giant that it was welcome to do business in India, but it had to follow the law of the land, irrespective of Twitter's own rules and guidelines. Tension between Twitter and the government kept mounting then onwards. Meanwhile, all social media platforms were notified to comply with the requirements of the newly promulgated IT law. The platforms were warned that non-compliance with rules would result in these social media companies losing their intermediary status. It is this status that provides exemptions and specified immunity from liabilities for any third-party information and data hosted by them. In other words, if the tech giants did not comply, they would be liable for punitive action. While Facebook and Google replied saying that they were working on complying with the new IT rules, Twitter refrained from commenting. WhatsApp challenged the new IT rules in Delhi High Court. In May, Delhi police started investigating a case of an alleged toolkit created by the Congress to defame Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Twitter tagged ruling Bharatiya Janata Party's national spokesperson Sambit Patra's tweet on the alleged toolkit as manipulated media. The investigating special cell of Delhi police sent a notice to Twitter. The social media giant was asked to explain how it described an alleged Congress toolkit tweet against the central government as manipulated media. The police reportedly questioned Twitter India MD Manish Maheshwari and visited the Twitter India offices in Delhi and Gurgaon. In early June, Twitter faced backlash by government officials after it briefly removed the blue tick verification badge from the personal account of Vice President Venkaiah Naidu and of several senior Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh RSS functionaries, including its chief Mohan Bhagwat. A political war of words had broken out.
What happens when you start finding the end-to-end encryption and tracing the first originator and direction to stop? What happens to privacy? It is blown up by a bomb called the Modi government bomb. This is complete censorship, complete thought control, complete terrorizing of the social media, complete control freak.
What we have unfortunately seen coming from the government of India is instead of seeking accountability, they are seeking control. Instead of ensuring that rights of citizens are maintained and free and fair news stories reach to them, we have seen that they're trying to control what is being read, what is being shared, and anyone who has a differing point of view will be held accountable.
It was only after this that Twitter became the only microblogging site to lose its legal immunity in India, making it liable for criminal cases for any unlawful post, as a publisher and not a platform. So taking down a post considered illegal by the government would no longer suffice. Government sources say Twitter repeatedly defied directives to appoint key officials for grievance redressal of users. The biggest flashpoint came over appointing a compliance officer, apparently delayed repeatedly by Twitter. The then IT minister lashed out at Twitter, accusing it of deliberate defiance and posing as free speech champion to circumvent India's legal system, pointing out alleged arbitrary use of manipulated media tags.
On the 25th of February, 3 months' time was given to the significant social media intermediary, namely those who are having 50 lakhs and more of followers. This exhausted itself on 26th of May this year. Okay. Many have complied. We were in correspondence. We gave them the last goodwill gesture. Please do. Comply. Otherwise it will have consequences.
But the opposition called the entire tussle a misplaced priority of this government.
विशाल हृदय का ये देश किसी एक प्लेटफॉर्म से कमजोर हो जाए। मैं समझता हूं कि सरकार को अपनी प्राथमिकताएं तय करनी चाहिए इस बात।
But there are some industry experts who opined that Twitter needed to follow the law of the land, like it does in many other countries.
A lot of paid influencers and bots have blown the conversations out of context, and a lot of information has been really misleading. So I think the government is fair, and I think we must all encourage and feel that Twitter should go ahead and set up local presence the way government is asking.
While all this was happening, an incident shared on social media platforms brought matters to a head. A video went viral on social media showing a 72-year-old being assaulted by a group of men. His beard was cut off as he tried to evade blows. The victim in the attack, Abdul Samad Saifi, in a Facebook Live with a local Samajwadi Party politician, alleged that he was forced to chant Jai Shri Ram. The victim's claims were widely shared across social media platforms and some websites. Following this, the UP police filed an FIR in Ghaziabad against a few online news portals, journalists and Twitter. Within days of the Abdul Saifi incident, another controversy broke out over a map of India on the career section of Twitter website under the header Tweet Life. The map showed Jammu and Kashmir, including Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, as a separate country, and it merged Ladakh with Tibet. A first information report was registered against Twitter India Managing Director Manish Maheshwari and News Partnership Head Amrita Tripathi under Sections 505(2) of the Indian Penal Code and Section 74 of the Information Technology Act. This was based on a complaint filed by a Bajrang Dal leader. The BJP accused Twitter of repeated acts of cartographic aggression.
It's not happened for the first time. But Twitter will have to answer. Why is it incorrectly showing India's boundaries, as also not complying with the laws of this land?
Though Twitter is yet to officially react to the FIR, Amrita Tripathi, without mentioning the FIR, tweeted, On 27th of June, Twitter finally appointed California-based Jeremy Kessel as their grievance redressal officer, as required under the new IT rules 2021.
The social media emerged as the most powerful medium for people to raise their voice of dissent right at the beginning. A decade back, it was celebrated and embraced as the most powerful medium for the masses. Soon it evolved into a threatening menace as the dark world of manipulation of information, fake news started to make its way. This gradually started the debate for regularizing social media platforms across the world. Let's take a listen.
At the end of 2010, Time magazine named Facebook's founder Mark Zuckerberg as its Person of the Year. Zuckerberg's brainchild, Facebook, had just connected 1 out of every dozen people on the planet through his platform. It was declared the Facebook age. And in a way, it was. 2010 was ending on a note of hope for a whole region. Arab Spring swept the Arab nations. people came out on the streets and demanded change. And for the first time, internet-based technologies played a central role in shaping political debates. Just months later, the India Against Corruption movement saw a well-coordinated media plan mobilizing citizens into action. Facebook alone saw more than 150 pages dedicated to the movement and its leaders.
The path forward is to bring people together, not push people apart, to connect more.
Over the years, social media revitalized public debate, bringing people together when they agreed on something or disagreed with something. And while Facebook remains the most popular social media across the world with a whopping 2.7 billion active monthly users, there are others who rule large sections of the social media pie. The entire last decade saw video sharing platform YouTube grow into the second largest social network, followed by a host of pure messaging applications like WhatsApp and WeChat, both of which connect over 1 billion users each. Instagram, launched in 2010, also boasts of 1 billion active users. Other platforms like Vine, Snapchat, and much later TikTok focused on shorter videos. As India-China border disputes intensified in 2020, the Indian government banned TikTok and other Chinese apps. The US President, Donald Trump, too threatens to ban TikTok beginning September 15th.
Well, I told them that they have till September 15th to make a deal. After that, we close it up in this country. And I said that the United States has to be compensated, well compensated, because we are the ones that are making it possible. And so we should be compensated. So the Treasury has to be well compensated.
A lot in social life became social media first. Hashtags broke the silence on sexual harassment, gave a war cry against discrimination, scaled up demands for action over climate change, and saw millions express their disagreement over policy failures. Adding to the online mix was a bombardment of fake news, inflammatory content, and troll armies shouting down those who disagreed. Manipulation of public opinion, amplification of polarization took over platforms. Facebook and Twitter, two platforms that dealt mostly in text, now shared a barrage of texts, ideas, facts, and news. Some true, others not so much. Fake news and propaganda could easily be passed around at lightning speed without a check, and it was consumed in large volumes. While some asked for the platforms to be held liable for the inflammatory content shared by its users, Facebook's founder refused to verify information his platform circulates. Zuckerberg maintained it is not for private companies to censor politicians or the news.
Which is on track to also connect more than 1 billion people.
He maintained Facebook was not the publisher. Rather, it just allows its users to publish whatever they want. Gone were the days when social media was heralding democracy in Arab nations. By 2018, there was proof that it was undermining it.